Joining me to discuss Biden's unpopular and anti-business tax plan is Brandon Arnold, Executive Vice President at National Taxpayers Union. Brandon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, can you remind us again, what exactly is Biden's corporate tax plan proposing?
Well, the biggest piece of his corporate tax plan is to raise the corporate rate. Remember, it was 35% prior to the Trump presidency. We were able to drop that in 2017 down to 21%, a huge tax cut that enabled us to grow our economy, to keep unemployment very, very low, and to have a historically strong economy. Now what they're talking about doing is pushing that back from 21% all the way up to 28%. And coupled with some of his other tax increases, you're looking at a loss potentially of 1 million American jobs, according to the National Association of Manufacturers. So a huge hit to our economy at a time when we can least afford it, because we're still trying to recover from the COVID recession, of course.
So what kind of effect would a corporate tax increase have on American companies, and specifically, how would that affect our competitiveness?
Yeah, so what they try to pretend, of course, is that corporate tax increases are paid by wealthy corporate executives, the C-suite types, the fat cats. And that's true to an extent. But a lot of the corporate tax increases are also paid by everyday Americans. That's just not me saying it. That's the bean counters at the Joint Committee on Taxation on Capitol Hill, saying that people making less than $100,000 a year will bear $100 billion of this tax increase. And the Tax Policy Center, a left-leaning think tank in Washington, actually says that middle-income Americans, average everyday Americans, will see a $300 tax increase under the Biden plan, almost exclusively because of this corporate tax increase, which is passed down to workers in the form of lower wages and less productivity.
So I want to take that point that you just mentioned a little bit deeper, because I think the folks tuning in today are going to be concerned to hear that, because a lot of us are falling under that 100K income mark. When we're talking about middle-class Americans, small businesses, what does this specifically mean? I mean, you're saying $300 per person. What could that mean for Americans in these small businesses?
Yeah, it's going to be brutal. I mean, you're talking about people making between about $50,000 and about $90,000. That's a lot of Americans. These aren't extraordinarily wealthy people. These are people that are just getting by and keeping their family afloat. They're going to see a tax increase of about $320. This is according to information from the Tax Policy Center, again, a left-leaning think tank. I would say that's a conservative estimate, because a lot of research out there shows that there's a higher incidence. There's more of the burden of these corporate tax increases that fall on workers. Again, not the C-suite types, not the corporate fat cats, but everyday workers just trying to make a good living and support their families. So at a time when inflation is already cutting into people's paychecks, at a time where it's more expensive to fill up your car with a tank of gas, more expensive to go fill up that cart of groceries at the grocery. Here's another hit that small businesses, that everyday families are going to feel directly in their pocketbooks.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, $320 is nothing to turn my nose to. So from my understanding, this is just a proposal. What is the likelihood that this tax hike will be made into law?
Well, the good news is there's a lot of fighting happening on Capitol Hill, and not just between Republicans and Democrats, but Democrats right now are fighting with other Democrats. In the Senate, there's some concern that the tax increase is too large. People like Joe Manchin, a moderate Democrat from West Virginia, wants to make it a 25% rate instead of a 28%. Of course, there are people in the House of Representatives, which is a more progressive body like AOC and her cohorts, the Squad, that want to see a higher corporate tax rate. So that type of fighting is actually good news for taxpayers who want to keep tax rates low, because it gives us a chance to hopefully, because margins are razor thin both in the House and the Senate, gives us hope that that infighting will lead to this whole deal collapsing and us keeping tax rates low, and Congress keeping his nose out of the economy, stop meddling with the economy, and giving us a chance to recover and get back to where we were in 2019, when things were roaring along nicely, when there were plentiful jobs, and we didn't have this COVID-induced recession that would be exacerbated, of course, by bad government policies.
Well, Brandon, I certainly hope that will be the case as well. Thank you so much for joining us today on Save the Nation.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.